So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I know that we are quite late in live telecast of this particular webinar, but जैसे कहते हैं देर आए दुरुस्त आए, और हम बहुत दुरुस्त आए हैं बिकॉज आज का जो टॉपिक है वो अपने आप में इतना इंटरेस्टिंग है टू अंडरस्टैंड and to go through, because yesterday we were talking about sustainability and something with the one of the speaker, and today we have with us Dr. Bindi Varghese. She is an associate professor from Christ University, Bangalore, and today she is going to talk on ecological surveillance, policy, praxis, and pedagogies. So to understand the concept and to understand the relationship of human being with the environment, and what are the pedagogies, what are the praxis and the policies involved, how to make it, how to sustain it. Let's go directly to Dr. Bindi Varghese and talk more about it. Ma'am, a very good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes. So first of all, a brief, we want to know more about you, and then we'll go to your topic directly.
Sure. May I just take over?
Yes, yes. All is yours. Your platform is, entire platform is yours, ma'am.
Okay. So first of all, a very good evening to one and all who has joined us for this live program. Firstly, let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers who put in this kind of effort to deliberate and iterate on vulnerable issues, contemporary factors for tourism, and bridging the gap between industry and academia. So very thankful to the organizers to create such a forum where academicians and scholars and eminent speakers could come forward and put their standpoints. This just not just help us to connect the gap between industry and academia, but also to a larger extent help us in discussing a lot of vulnerable factors, which is bound to be discussed at a larger forum. So it's my pleasure, firstly, to discuss and deliberate on one of the very pertinent area, which I feel is very important. May I request the organizers to share the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So, I hope the screen is visible, ma'am.
Yes, to me the screen is visible. I would request, due to some technical glitch, I would request you to change the slide whenever required.
Ji, sure, ma'am. Sure.
Thank you, ma'am, for a warm introduction. Let me also introduce myself. I belong to Christ University. I work in the Tourism Management Department. And my active areas of research is sustainable livelihood and impact assessment studies, and a lot of contemporary researches, which is on the lines of sustainability, marketing, management, so on and so forth. So as an academician, we always feel that tourism education is to be iterative, and it is a very crucial aspect to bring out very sensitive topics which requires, or I would rather say, which demands a lot of attention. So thereby, I thought it's very relevant for me to iterate on a very under-investigated area, I would rather say, as ecological surveillance, while I'll be deliberating through my talk on policies, praxis, and pedagogies. Just before introduction, before I get into the technical side of it, we always feel that, sustainability is the buzzword in today's time. And we find that sustainability has weaved its way into every aspect of our, not just tourism system, but the lifestyle of people around us in our neighborhood. So there is something very important for us to be very careful and watchful about our imbibing aspect of how do we deal with sustainable orientation, or rather I would say a little bit sensitization on environmental consciousness. I'm bringing in a very restrictive framework for today's discussion because I personally feel that this is not a very well explored area by researchers and the tourism administrators, where we'll have to sometimes tighten the screw and look at what could be the surveillance. What is an ecological surveillance? What is it that we could do in terms of carrying it forward to bridge the practice of theory of sustainability take it one step ahead to the industry, practitioners. And it is such a great August audience I might have who have joined us virtually. And I feel that this is very imperative to look at very larger spectrum of ecological sensitization and sustainability issues, which demand some kind of ideological perspectives. So let me, through this introduction, take you to the next slide, which is about ecological surveillance, primarily looking at security evaluation, which is a very crucial aspect. Now, primarily when you see this, we find the UNWTO's SDG goals over there. We find a lot of important pertinent factors. So as an academicians, we discuss and deliberate with young minds. I enjoy a lot of time wherein I invest on the young minds, where we deliberate in our classrooms and research-oriented discussions and academic conclaves, where we find as an academician, what is our role in terms of practicing sustainability, and do we really require a surveillance? Sometimes most of the researchers iterate that it's great to have a surveillance. It is great to have an opportunity to bring in surveillance in place to form and ideate a resilient community. A community which is bothered, which is conscious, which is sensitized about the issues or the prime global challenges which face our ecosystem or ecospace. Now, though it looks like larger terms like ecological surveillance and security evaluation, this is a very integral part of sustainable development. Perhaps sustainable development or sustainable tourism development is like a larger than life perspective or a big broad umbrella, wherein we today are deciphering on a strategic vision, a strategic philosophy, or something to make our practitioners connect with lifestyle. So this is all after for what? It is primarily for good sustainable well-being, build a resilient society or a community, thereby community well-being, and finally we look at destinations well-being. So it's very important that in this process or in this journey of sustainable evaluation, there is a lot of requirement to have channelize a conducive approach to rational approach to practice, wherein we talk about responsible and sustainable outlook, and which rather tells us about a development trend for ecological security. So thereby, this is helping us to look at some kind of rationalization for ecological sustenance, self-sufficiency, energy efficiency, and thereby the role of a resilient community. So in a larger frame, when we see a safe and a resilient community, it requires social connections or social connectivity. Primarily, it also talks about involving or putting in place a good skeleton of governance, planning, response and recovery system, and ensuring a risk reduction method so that we can look at what are the vulnerabilities and how is it that we can bridge this gap. I think the image is trying to give you that perspective about the need for larger level global perspectives on how exactly we can ensure and form a resilient society which can deal with all these vulnerabilities with better preparedness. May I request the next slide, please?
Sure.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a slide which will cater to some amount of attention. We see a mechanism to channelize ecological surveillance. We see the emphasis is on 3 different zones where we talk about ecological pressure, ecological safety, sustainable development, so on and so forth. So these are factors which are required for channelizing and good, efficient ecological surveillance. And I emphasize on these 3 factors because we must be conscious that what is it that we do for a vulnerable destination, for an ecocentric destination? Are we insisting firstly on a lot of ecological pressure? Because naturally, when a lot of tourists come in place, there's natural exploitation. There's ecosystem and other factors which may be bound to get impacted by large flock of people coming into the place. Is the destination prepared enough? Are we, through the process of building in demand, generate demand, cater to the supply, are we sufficiently looking at measures of over exploitation to deal with? These are certain questions which, as academicians and research scholars and research enthusiasts, should iterate on. Yeah, I think the slide just moved out. Yeah. So these are factors. Firstly, let me just emphasize the need to look at these vulnerabilities. Thereby, what is it that we should address to reduce the intense impact on these ecocentric destinations, which is bound to get impacted? What is it that as a tourism community, a proactive tourism community, we should do? So this is something as practitioners we should look at. Is there over exploitation? We understand tourism activities are bound to have over exploitation of natural environment, and it's quite natural to have ecological pressure through exactly emphasizing on maximizing the economic benefit. We want multiplier effect, we want a lot of people to come in, we want large number of people, we want the destination to do really well. What is it that we would do 100% to bring in that demand? So in this race of meeting the demand expectation, are we overexploiting the resources? So if yes, what is it that we must be conscious about? What is it that we must iterate? What is that we must be taking that extra step? Maybe it will cost, maybe it will have manpower engagement, maybe it will have an inclusive engagement, maybe it will have a need for a good governance. I insist on a good governance system which will drive tourism development in the most harmonious way. It's quite natural that overexploitation is disastrous, no doubt about it. But how are we balancing the economic pleasure, the economic gain, building the society with being in demand, being on the top-notch destination? So how are we compromising on it? Are we inviting irreparable damages? Thereby, ladies and gentlemen, there is a requirement to have some amount of ecological surveillance to handle these pressures. Secondly, I discuss about building a resilient community to look at eco-security and development. So who are these community representations? Our stakeholders, naturally. We have a good governance. We have intense private businesses. We have communities. We have non-governmental organizations, our advocating bodies. We have tourists. We have all of them should imbibe the ideology of eco-sustainability, ecocentrism, and above all, eco-security development. These are factors which is bound to have environmental impact assessment, which is the need of the hour. Of course, environmental impact assessment will cater to sustainable development and issues and other factors about how environment can cope with it. What are the coping strategies? So are there EIA factors which will consider stakeholders from all levels, all organizations cutting across their operational aspects, propagating about sustainable development? Are we handling our vulnerabilities in the best possible manner? How are we ensuring a harmonious, integrated growth and development? These are factors which is helping our destination with better stewardship, with consciousness, with a sustainable outlook, and above all, a good surveillance will put a lot of things in place. So these are factors as the most integral factors to put together to understand the issues, the challenges, the pressure at the destination, and to handle them in the best possible manner. May I have the next slide? My next agenda, what you see here, is to have a close observation into a natural area destination. An ecological rationalization which demands some kind of discourse analysis of natural destinations. It's argued that management and use of natural areas of tourism, how is it that we must contribute in terms of enhancing visitor experience? What kind of discourse analysis we are into to have a perspective about infrastructural growth, development with harmony, and integration with environment? How well synergized and network is our open tourist space? What is performatively engagement of these spaces? What is ecological modernizations? These are factors which is definitely demanding a reflective praxis. We have, to make meaningful tourism, to make enjoyable and sustainable tourism, it is very important to have a performative engagement into the tourism space, which may be even a highly eco-centric destination. How are we rationalizing nature? How are we capitalizing on the value for money for the visitor? Are we building up any kind of scope for modernization to understand the ecological pressure? So these are small term factors which will make a destination rethink on its tourism. So by this slide, we are technically looking at what are the performance spaces and how do we show multiple discourses in place, and how is it that performative assessment makes a synergy there. So if the synergy has to be unleashed, these tourist spaces need to have some kind of systematic approach to understand the tourism engagement, the visitor engagement, thereby resulting into a controlled form of tourism. If it demands, if it's overcrowded, it's quite better to have a destination well balanced and managed than having an overcrowded place which lead to dissatisfaction. So it's quite crucial that we look into these factors and perspectives to understand the contextual importance of rationalization of ecology. Moving on to my next slide, which is very important for us to look at certain integral factors as a timeline. So this gives us a complete snapshot of whatever has happened in the part and parcel of the sustainable tourism global agenda, which typically talks about certain landmark conferences, certain landmark factors which discusses about most integral factors of practicing sustainability. And most importantly, we find that how does it really become a global agenda? How does it become a most important factor, taking from Stockholm Conference, Rio Conference, the multiple summits which has happened, the SDGs which has prompted, and the importance which is laid on most integral factors of facilitating tourism by the big SDG plans which we have. And we are very futuristic because we are looking at the UN landmark. Of course, that's an international agenda where we look at some of the innovative aspects of tourism business, sustainable practices as a global agenda. How are we looking at it in a harmonious way? So this timeline will take us and be reflective about our past for sure. But at the same time, it's opening up new corridors for something which is engaging for the community in terms of circular economy, blue economy, oceanography, etc., which gives us a perspective about sustainable development goals in the most harmonious way, to practice inclusive engagement considering the newer innovative aspects of the operational perspective of tourism. So this is giving us a timeline to understand how does SDGs are making a contribution in terms of opening up new corridors for newer interventions to practice a conscious, sustainable tourism business. The other day, I had a very good deliberation with a big forum of experts who work on the domains of water conservation, who work on the domains of people who work in resorts, and they are great practitioners who imbibe plans, policies to build quality tourism experience. Maybe they might find it quite expensive because sustainability is not something which is a non-expensive factor. It's definitely costing. It's definitely conscious reminder about the scarcity of our resources, and it's more about a lifestyle and a behavior. So in that forum, the deliberations was about how is ecocentrism equated with sustainable buying behavior of tourists, and most importantly, what kind of practices do practitioners place on their board so that it's more enjoyable for the tourist, thereby as you know, the practitioners are not academicians and not researchers probably, who may not get into the details of maybe what circular economy, what's bioeconomy, all of these, but then they definitely know the nuances there because they represent the trade. So this is a very iconic factor which will open up new corridors for us to be reflective. I would emphasize on the term reflective because sustainable tourism practices are a reflective exercise, which is like our lifestyle, which is a strategic vision for us to take it forward and practice them through our initiatives, action plans, policies, mega policies, etc., which builds tourism in the best possible manner, catering to the need of the society. I move on to my next point, which is primarily about sustainable tourism development. May I have the next slide? How exactly are we working on practicing a quality environmental outcome, which is the most pivotal aspect in the context of destination's value proposition? So this is a very iterative slide because we find that it is not easy to handle a quality of environmental outcome and ensure that we have a quality of life as practitioners, as service providers, as end users. It's very important that there is some kind of discipline, urban discipline for environmental monitoring, which initiates the big broad term called as surveillance. And urban discipline is a very conscious reminder for the people in the system, be it a practitioner, be it a government authority, be it a non-advocacy, be it an advocacy group or a non-governmental organization, be it a community who are just cooperative about tourism, be it the tourist. It is quite inevitable to have a compromise done on urban disciplines for environmental monitoring. If we ignore this fact, I don't think we would do justice to maintain a synergy for ecological surveillance. And of late, through some of the upcoming researchers, of course, we are networked with good researchers around. And I see my scholars who get into discussions, who write into research writing, practice the green ideology, blended with technology, a tech-enabled eco-space, which they call it smart tourism, come green initiatives. WTO also iterated on green investment strategies and attracting all dimensions of all spectrums of the tourism system, all dimensions of the tourism business, bring them together, put them together, practice sustainability for a quality of life. This technically leads to the quality of environmental outcome. We must definitely be bothered about green initiatives, eco-sensitized measures, technological interventions to put things at ease, AI or blockchain modeling done in terms of connecting with, cutting across different disciplines and then synergizing there to practice the green initiatives and sustainable outlook in the best possible manner with innovation, with synergy laid between the urban disciplines, environmental monitoring, green technology alliance put together, helping us to do the surveillance process in the best possible manner, looking at or emphasizing at a quality of environmental outcome. This is something which is helping us to promote, a sensitized, well-informed tourist community who are not just end users of tourism because I paid money, I have the right to be at the destination, I enjoy to my best, and I do whatever I want to do. I move ahead to the next destination in my next holiday. Definitely, this is not our approach. As a proactive tourism community, it's very essential that we promote harmonious, significant development for the people who are directly connected with tourism or indirectly connected with tourism. So, a lot of research works are on the lines of AI integration, on the lines of need for a good security system in place for the big propaganda of environmental quality, quality of environmental outcome, quality of life. I would rather say the well-being of a destination, which ultimately benefits every single stakeholder. Let me just take 2 seconds on who are these stakeholders: public, private, the community, the travelers, and definitely the non-governmental bodies. They are all connected. They are all connected because we have scattered resources who have different capacities, different vulnerabilities, different issues put together, different capacities and scales of development. And what is the ideology of well-being? Is it just community well-being? Is it just business well-being? Is it only smart eco space where tourism interacts with every aspects of it? Or is it just an ideology where it's a win-win scenario for every single stakeholder? It's quite reflective here again. I think every single practitioner, every single tourism student, every single ecology, somebody who practices ecology or is in the lines of studying that, should iterate on it. It is mandatory to have a environment, a staple environment, which synergizes sustainable practices, takes forward development, emphasizes on community well-being, destination well-being, some amount of mechanism in place to monitor, to evaluate. If we go wrong, what is it that we must do? What is the mitigative measure we should practice? What is it that we can go wrong? What is it that we have gone wrong in the past? What is it that technological integration is doing that magic on tourism? What is it that the need for sustainable indicators dictating terms to do tourism at their, the cost of the vulnerabilities, and ensuring that there's no scope for irreparable damages. There's no scope for unacceptable modality of tourism. So it's quite important to have a strategic vision to practice sustainability. Having an eco-centric destination, beautiful land, picturesque landscapes, is it just enough to practice sustainability? Just be conscious, just be careful. Let's do waste management well. Let's take care of global issues and we're done. Absolutely no, because we must look beyond what is seen by our eyes, and we must definitely look at having some form of prerogative methods which will help us to define sustainability and rethink on tourism pattern. So I think it's very important that we have a good calculation, a good probability calculation to understand why there is surveillance, to understand why we must join hands with AI integrated mechanisms or a smart business environment where we should be having a sustainability orientation. Why is that we should have importance laid on quality of environment, quality of our resources? How is that we should practice surveillance? I would rather say it's the definition laid on circular economy, bioeconomy, the green initiatives, most important, self-sufficiency, energy efficiency. These are going to be way forward agendas for a destination to be equipped with the standards for practicing sustainability and be conscious about our approaches, measures, etc., to build tourism in a bigger platform. I would like to go to the next slide. So this is what I was iterating on. What is our SCP pattern? Sustainable consumption and production pattern. What is it that we are iterating? What is that we are best assessing through a program of sustainable consumption and production pattern? This is from the point of view or from the lens of a practitioner perspective. All these stakeholders definitely should join hand, work in alliance, work in collaboration, so that the sustainability agenda is well received. It is just because it's trending, let's follow some practices, does not lead to any solutions of addressing the vulnerabilities of eco-centric destinations. Very important factor is that harmonious, integrated pattern to carry forward sustainability. All the stakeholders cannot work in different directions or silos to have something called as a sustainable consumption of tourism Of course, we stand for a proactive tourism community which understands the vulnerabilities of a destination. What is it that we have as tools and techniques? What is it that we have measures to have a control over fervent marketing and have not just promote marketing but also administer destination management, but administer sustainability pattern, but be conscious about what is our initiatives, what is the drive which is picking up, how are we dealing with these regulatory bodies, how are we dealing with the governance, what are the kind of issues and challenges which we come across, how is it that we are preparing a community which is proactive in tourism, how is it that we are practicing inclusive engagement. This, we can go to the next slide. Now, whatever I have said is taking us through a complete shift to sustainable consumption and production. You may look at the diagram, which is like a well explained integrated forum which binds energy efficiency, which has the tourism industry over there, which has the planning management, etc. there. I did not mention destination management organization, but then it is visible because the minute we talk about planning, operations, investment, monitoring, we have DMOs also in place. We have some kind of change of approach to rethink the way we have been using our resources, which is very essential to be conscious about in terms of consumption. So it's very important that we have partners who join hand in hand in defining a synergy for working through either participatory or collaborative, some kind of bilateral agreement for joining hands to have this synergy unleashed for practicing tourism. We should have good amount of good proposition, a value proposition which is like a wholesome approach, which defines our praxis, which defines our pedagogies, which defines us how to practice tourism in the best harmonial way. How is it that for a simple common layman, it's a win-win scenario? I take care of my environment, I take care of my business. There is a good amount of synergy in terms of understanding the narrow downing, understanding and narrowing it down the wastage aspect of tourism. Everything needs to be on a regenerative mode. It's very essential as practitioners, we must participate in the process of regenerative tourism. These are some things which is very important for us to understand little beyond the sustainable consumption. We have the 5 A's, which is ever static. We have the dynamic business environment. We have pestle factors over there. We have the tourism system in place. We know what are the vulnerabilities and the issues which can come. Understanding all this, how are we creating a good environment for practicing tourism with good security analysis, surveillance in place, and build tourism in the best possible manner. Moving on to my next point, we are iterative about something called as a value chain. This is a very intense diagram. I think if it's on live, it's going to be there. You can take a detailed look at it. I would just take your orientation on the value chain process. I will not take a large time here because as such, it's a very complex prototype of defining a value chain. The process starts with a good governance. The process starts with policies, planning, mega policies, short-term plans, long-term plans, which is indicative about something called as governance, a good governance in place. In between, you would find the tourism industry, every strata of tourism industry, transportation, accommodation, food and beverage, leisure industry, supporting industry, allied sectors. You name it, you have various other industries which come together, offer services. So we have the industry per se. We have all of these goods and services which cater to it. We have logistics service providers. There is some kind of sensitization on green initiatives for these logistics service providers. Of late, we've been reading a lot through our research works and publications on what is the role of green initiatives? What is the role of logistics service providers? How do they integrate and imbibe the value chain? How do they put together supply, demand, PPP in place? How do they create this whole centric approach to understand value co-creation for tourism business. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very important that we must definitely spend some time to understand the hidden factors of the tourism sector, the issues and challenges. The vulnerabilities are different for different profile of destinations. What is a value proposition? We have the industry, we have the businesses, we have the governance. What is the outlier of the business segment? Very important to be reflective about it. This gives us a wholesome approach to look at value chain and co-creation required to build tourism in the best possible manner, which is concurrent and relevant in today's context. I'll move into the next point where we examine something which is a talk in the current research domains, where a lot of regenerative forms of tourism come in. There's circular economy, which is very trending. There are three dimensions I would like to iterate, which are very significant. We can't do away with them. Circular economy is as simple as an approach which is about energy recovery, which is about all those infrastructural requirements. How do you narrow down on your wastages? How do you recycle? How do you dictate newer terms of the 10 R's of sustainable development? How do you look at supply from an economic perspective for stakeholders? How do you drive demand, which is consumer centric? Today, I'm very glad that, our young minds are very conscious about what are the green initiatives and how are we practicing them. Is there a gap between the theoretical parameters of assessing, be it circular economy, be it bioeconomy, be it the blue economy, all of them blended together to recycle and process tourism with minimum amount of wastages which are narrowed down to literally zero? It cannot be possible unless we have a collective pattern of service consumption, eco-sensitization, understanding of manufacturing side, supply side, sustainable philosophy for different stakeholders, different perspective. How are we implementing the R's, which is on my next slide, describing how the circular economy can be extended to understand the nuances of the trade. For a hospitality business, it's different. For, let's say, for somebody who's engaging into this slide, which talks about the synergies and approaches. What is the biodiversity? What is the bioeconomy, which is definitely unleashing the various factors on the ecocentrism, not just looking at water, not just looking at the green side of it, a blended approach where we have bioeconomy and circular economy blending together to give a new dimension and spectrum to practice sustainability. This is a forum where we demand to have a surveillance. Where are we going? A little ahead of, moving out and then exploring the unexplored spaces and deal with the challenges and repeat the same mistakes if you're not conscious enough. So thereby, is it only just about handling your footprint, handling about your reduction of wastage, handling your waste management, handling your water efficiency, or is it just being the philosophy of self-sufficiency, energy efficiency, etc., for a harmonious integrated growth? Can we have the next pointer? So this is something, the new R's, I think all of it is very relevant. We look at end of life and we try to refurbish and recycle. We use them, engage them. We rethink on our ideologies of business. We extend to the best possible manner the lifespan, the management, the design for disassembly and assembly. How are we looking at the vulnerabilities of destinations? I think from my first slide, I've been very conscious about indicating the vulnerabilities of places, of destinations. There may be hill, there may be coastal, there may be ecocentric places, there may be vulnerable rural front where our urban space is exploring into and running into from the far maddening crowd. What is our consciousness of sustainable approach there? Are they well prepared to receive a large flock of tourists who will just come and engage, and thereby a lot of businesses do happen, which is good. But then are we having a good surveillance there so that we are not deviating from the mistakes, what we have done in the past on the environment? We have no doubt about it. A lot of climatic changes, a lot of geographical changes, a lot of reformations on the way in which energy efficiency today it is discussed. It was not discussed in the past, maybe one decade earlier also. Why is it that strategic interventionists are making conscious effort to study this, to examine this, to understand the production side, demand side, look at the circular economy aspect? How is it that we can narrow down on the wastage? What is it that sustainable buying behavior? What is it that sustainable supply side? All of these are very, very, relevant and important because we have a long generation who look forward for these resources. What is our approach? What is our prototype? Design represents a prototype. Production represents our supply side, where we have the practitioners, we have the industry, we have the hoteliers, we have the resorts and innovative, newer innovative forms of businesses which come in. How are they trying to align with the circular economy? I think it is again a very, very reflective angle. Everybody looks at it from a different point of view, but then we must definitely be conscious about these, that it has to be somewhere down the line handled with a good amount of ecological security and surveillance required to have tourism on our terms. I repeat, our terms. Our terms is to maintain that ecological efficiency, narrow down on the issues and challenges, and then enjoy the attractions as much as we do for our younger generations to come. Reinvent the wheel in such a way that it is refurbished in such a way that it is more enjoyable and value for money from a visitor point of view for visitor appreciation. I move on to my next point, where we are having some kind of ideology on rethinking tourism. Now, this is something I do not want to be vocal about it, but then all my pointers are there. We have conspired everything what we spoke about sustainable perspective. To sum up on the surveillance and security, it has a public face through policy. We need to have a smart governance in place. We need to have a road ahead for urban disciplines. We must create good private investors in place who imbibe the ideology of sustainability and bring it to the system as a behavior. Create an ecosystem as ecospace where sustainability with harmonious development through the intermediaries. For that, we need to have good regulatory bodies in place, good alliances, good partnership. So on the whole, we must definitely rethink on how tourism is practiced. Are we building knowledge? Are we empowering our stakeholders? Are we inspiring them to act on different synergies? Today, there is a lot of vulnerabilities. How are we dealing with it? Today, everything is very good at pace. Tomorrow, are we foreseeing growth? What is the probability of going beyond your expectation with a large task force of tourism, and with aggressive marketing, we are going to be there at the top-notch level? How are we going to deal with these issues and, stakeholder engagement? So definitely, we must rethink the way tourism is practiced. It can be taken in a very harmonious way, understanding the ecological sensitivity, understanding the ecological security, a need for a good surveillance system to practice tourism in the best possible manner. May I have my next slide? This is a very iterative slide which will make us think. Who will practice this? I said the practitioners. It could be as simple as a travel consultant. It could be as simple as a resort. It could be as simple as a business hotel. What are our initiatives? Firstly, are we doing a green wash in the name of responsible tourism and sustainable approach? Or are we really imbibing the ideology of sustainability and making it not just an agenda, but just as a responsible action? Are we having some kind of contribution for this consciousness of the scarcity of resources, the need to have a clean, green, well thought about environment, and a good approach, because we need a good governance in place? We need international organizations like the UNWTO. We need iterative measures by them. Every time there is in the timeline, if you remember, we have the Rio, we have the Stockholm conference, we have Brundtland's report. All of them moved the ideology of sustainability in different dimensions. And today we stand here with innovative concepts of different forms of economy to build sustainability. The thought process has started from these organizations, regulatory bodies, contributing to the donor community. A community which gives to tourism, which gets benefit from tourism, and again, this is reciprocated. This is where a consciousness is brought in for a community also to be very strategic in point that we must plan tourism so that we should have a quality, clean, green environment by which we maintain the critical issues which can be a problem. We are conscious about it. We take initiatives. We take strong measures to control tourism if it is under crisis or if it is bound to get into crisis. So all of this is for the travelers and for the community who is working in a circular manner, win-win scenario for everybody, making a whole comprehensive tourism, helping us practice sustainability in the best possible manner for everybody's integrated growth. So with this, I think my overview on sustainable approaches and ecological surveillance by certain, understanding on praxis, methods, pedagogies, all that is in place. I'll be glad if there is a Q&A possible. I'm sorry there was overshooting of a little time, but then
No.
as academicians, we become vocal about how
Yeah.
sustainable practices and regenerative concept is essential in today's time.
Yes, and it's a really an sustainable talk that you have given today, and you're so much spellbounded into your slides and your talk, the way you are explaining things. Excellent, ma'am. So just something to understand and to ask your viewpoint towards sustainable approaches. When you have explained about the vulnerable areas and the vulnerable communities, and especially in today's scenario, if you talk about the hill stations and the carrying capacity of the hill stations and seeing the amount of the tourists that are going there. So how do you look at this, and what are your views? And if something is given to you, what suggestions, recommendations will you suggest to understand the things there in terms
Thank
of
you
total?
for the thought. Firstly, it is again giving back to you and the viewers who are joined us virtually here. Many of us are into our digital space and social forums. We see, beautiful picturesque locations where innovative forms of accommodations. On a hill, you have a hanging extended platform where you have a room. You get up, you view this beautiful outlook at the destination. These are typically the causes of vulnerabilities. It's very important not to play with the nature with concreteness in the name of sustainability and environmental or experience engagement and all those good experiences for the travelers today. We should not compromise on the physical aspects of a destination. To put that platform straight on a hillock, it is a lot of disturbance on the environment. That is precisely vulnerability. For a coastal destinations, vulnerabilities cannot be addressed if we have the coastal regulation zone, if we have the hotels a little far off, if we maintain the distance and the proximity from the beach, or if we have a controlled form of tourism. Absolutely not possible. We have witnessed a lot of destinations which have been drastically impacted by high human footfall and improper engagement of tourists at the destinations and ignorance by most important people, the community, the governance, the stakeholders. The blame is for them. To understand every destination, a religious destination has a different way to look at it. All these spiritual destinations where the environment, the physical terrain is so complicated because there is possibility. You have this purchase system in some places, right? You have to go, you have to plan accordingly and go. So these are methods. But then when you start constructing there, when you start disturbing the eco space, that is a trigger for vulnerabilities. And by chance, without any random thoughts about a scientific process, without EIA, without all this, you have just implemented it We should limit it. We should not multiply with more number of resorts and hotels to give that kind of experience.
Wow.
We need the destinations for today, tomorrow, and thereby we should not bring in too much of concreteness there.
Well answered, ma'am. Well answered. To add to more onto this, I would like to ask if there are two things. One is to restrict the number of the tourists, the quantity, and one is to bring some kind of an alternative tourism. Nowadays, it is being talked about alternative tourism. So we have seen there are destinations in our country which have a special kind of permission before going there. So do you also recommend such vulnerable places should have a special kind of a permission system to be started by the stakeholders so that we can hold the tourist, one thing, or you suggest to pursue not to hold the tourist but to pursue some kind of an alternative form of a tourism?
My propaganda is always, when I discuss with my students, an
Ji,
ideally for a good destination, if it is resourceful, it should be
ji.
high impact and low volume.
Okay, right.
Because you know that is good, you will wait for it. You know if it's restrictive, you have the desire to visit at any point of time if you have the health and of course the purchasing power. But then it cannot be, though we are propagators of accessible tourism, it should have some kind of surveillance to understand the vulnerabilities and the issues. Thereby, we should have a balanced form of footfall of the tourist.
Ji,
And
ji.
if somebody is spending some money, it is visitor value for money and visitor appreciation. I
Ji.
become extensively contented if I visit a destination with minimum number of people and the destination is beautiful. Than
Right.
in contrast, a destination which is flooded with people and then I'm also adding on to it. I don't enjoy being there. And I feel somewhere down the line, okay, this is overdeveloped, over tourism. Let us look at some other kind of destinations and then same story repeats. So
Right.
as community, as stakeholders, as governance, everybody has to be looking at, just because there is a promising side and economic benefit, one must be definitely conscious where to start tourism and how to start tourism, how to channelize tourism in the best possible manner so that we practice sustainability and not just preach.
Right, right. Thank you once again, ma'am. And it's a delight to share a platform with you and to listen to you, your views. They are commendable, and we are glad that we have done a webinar with you.
My pleasure.
Our pleasure as well, and we are also looking forward more such webinars in future with you and to gain more knowledge onto the concept of tourism. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Looking forward for more collaborations and more knowledge sharing. It's always
One last thing, ma'am, to finish this particular webinar today. The students, especially because you are yourself a professor and you are teaching students also. Those students from tourism and those who are looking their career in this particular field, what message you want to give to them?
I always tell my student community that as
Ji.
practitioners of tourism, as propagators of tourism, we must preach what is global. We must bring in global standards, but with a local tinge to it. We must get back to our roots. We must not forget our communities who live there, who face the blunt side of tourism. As industry people, you would find that people are doing business, they're doing great with the industry, they promote places, destination doing good, you build a top-notch destination. But after that, what? There is always a look for regeneration. There is always a need for redefining your approach. Then you start digging and identifying that what else under sustainability should we iterate. It is just a conscious outlook so that we make it as a practice, as a behavior, and thereby we are just propagators of quality of life for community, for tourists, for all stakeholders, thereby destinations well-being. So communities well-being definitely will result in a destination's well-being. Destination's well-being is taken care. I'm sure there is tourist need taken care, practitioners need taken care, and all stakeholders have that best of best space to practice tourism, so that we have everybody on a win-win scenario.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, thank you for coming.